When we think of medieval meat, most of us conjure up images of greasy, spoiled scraps, barely preserved with whatever haphazard methods peasants could manage. It's easy to imagine meat hanging in chimney corners, salted and left to dry over a smoky, flickering fire, producing a product that no modern diner would willingly touch. The reality, however, was far more nuanced. Beneath the rustic exterior of medieval kitchens and the humble peasant diet lay a surprisingly sophisticated culinary and preservation art. Meat in medieval Europe was not only a vital source of protein, but also a testament to centuries of accumulated knowledge about flavor, preservation, and even health. What may appear crude to our modern eyes was, in fact, the result of deliberate experimentation and careful technique, honed over generations. Medieval smoking practices, in particular, reveal a depth of skill and understanding often overlooked today. Unlike the rapid, industrialized smoking processes used in modern factories, medieval craftsmen relied on patience, precise timing, and an intimate knowledge of fire, wood types, and airflow. Cold smoking, for instance, involved exposing meat to smoke at low temperatures over extended periods. This method didn't cook the meat, but infused it with preservative compounds, while simultaneously creating complex flavors that we rarely experience in today's mass-produced smoked products. The choice of wood was also critical. Oak, beech, apple, and other hardwoods were selected not only for the flavor they imparted, but also for their antibacterial and antifungal properties. Each piece of meat, whether pork, beef, or game, was treated according to its texture, fat content, and intended use, reflecting a level of sophistication that modern smoked products rarely replicate. Smokehouses themselves were carefully designed structures. Some were built over multiple levels, with meat hung from rafters while a slow, smoldering fire generated smoke in a separate chamber below. The air circulation was controlled through vents and small openings, allowing craftsmen to regulate smoke density, temperature, and moisture levels. This attention to detail prevented spoilage, minimized the risk of harmful bacteria, and ensured a consistent end product. In essence, medieval smokehouses functioned as early laboratories for food preservation, where trial, error, and observation created reliable methods that produced both safety and flavor. Health considerations were not accidental either. While today's industrial smoking often involves artificial additives and rapid, high-heat processes that strip meat of nutrients, medieval smoking could preserve vitamins, minerals, and other bioactive compounds. The slow smoking process, combined with curing and salting techniques, not only inhibited microbial growth, but also created a product that supported longer-term sustenance without the need for refrigeration. The meat was easier to digest, and in some cases could retain nutritional properties that modern convenience meats cannot match. Archaeological studies of medieval settlements and historical records suggest that communities that mastered these techniques had fewer foodborne illnesses than one might expect for an era without modern sanitation. In a sense, the slow, careful process of smoking meat was a form of preventive medicine embedded within culinary practice. Medieval meat preservation was also deeply connected to cultural and social practices. The act of smoking or curing meat was not solely functional. It was a craft, and sometimes even a communal activity. Families, guilds, and entire villages would pass down recipes and methods, often tailored to local climates, available wood types, and specific livestock breeds. Spices, herbs, and other natural preservatives were frequently incorporated, not just for taste but for antimicrobial properties. This careful attention to every detail demonstrates that medieval cooks understood the science of preservation, even if they didn't articulate it in modern terms. Their work required observation, experience, and a keen sense of timing, making it an art form as much as a necessity. Contrast this with contemporary industrial practices, where speed and uniformity dominate. Modern meat smoking often involves injecting brines, applying chemical preservatives, or using high-temperature, short-duration smoking to meet demand and reduce costs. While efficient, these methods sacrifice flavor complexity, texture, and some nutritional qualities. The products are designed for rapid consumption and mass distribution rather than long-term storage or deep sensory enjoyment. In effect, what medieval craftsmen achieved through slow, attentive methods has largely been lost, replaced by convenience and industrial scale. The subtlety of flavors, The delicate balance of smoke, salt, and fat, and the nutrient preservation inherent in traditional methods are rarely experienced today. The medieval approach to smoked meat also extended to preparation techniques that enhanced both taste and usability. Meat was sometimes pre-treated through brining, salting, or marinating before smoking. Certain cuts were smoked longer to make them last through winter months, while others were lightly smoked to be consumed quickly, demonstrating a nuanced understanding of how preservation influenced flavor, texture, and shelf life. These techniques allowed medieval communities to store food safely, feed large households, and plan for scarcity without losing quality. It was a system that relied on skill, observation, and tradition, producing results that balanced practicality with culinary sophistication. Interestingly, medieval smoked meat was not limited to peasant fare. Nobles and wealthy households also prized smoked and cured meats, though their methods often involved additional steps, such as aging in wine or layery. Often relies on speed and chemical additives, medieval techniques were rooted in patience, observation, and craftsmanship. Cold smoking, a method carried out at temperatures below 90 degrees Fahrenheit, was the standard in European smokehouses, particularly in regions such as Germany, France, and England. This method involved suspending meat in a cool, consistent stream of smoke for extended periods, sometimes days, sometimes weeks, allowing the smoke to penetrate slowly without cooking the meat. The slow process allowed antimicrobial compounds in the smoke, such as phenols and formaldehyde, to act on the meat, reducing bacterial growth and prolonging shelf life. At the same time, a thin protein layer, known as the pell, formed naturally on the meat's surface. This layer not only absorbed the rich flavors of the smoke but also acted as a protective barrier, preventing spoilage and adding texture and depth to the final product. The choice of wood was more than a matter of availability. It was a defining factor in the flavor and quality of smoked meat. In Germany, France, and England, beechwood was widely favored for its mild, steady smoke. It enhanced the meat's natural flavors without overpowering them, allowing the subtle qualities of pork, beef, or game to remain prominent. In contrast, apple and cherry wood were used for their slightly sweeter smoke, imparting a delicate complexity that could elevate even simple cuts of meat. Some medieval craftsmen experimented with wood blends to create nuanced flavor profiles, combining woods with different smoke densities, aromatic properties, and burning rates. The selection of wood required both knowledge and experience. A poorly chosen wood could ruin the meat, producing bitter, acrid flavors that were difficult to mask. Each choice reflected not only local resources but also centuries of trial, error, and accumulated culinary wisdom. Smokehouses themselves were feats of ingenuity, designed to manipulate air and fire to achieve the ideal smoking environment. In many cases, outdoor pits were used, with underground tunnels or channels directing smoke gently upward into the chamber where meat was suspended. This approach allowed craftsmen to keep the fire at a distance, ensuring that the smoke remained cool and consistent. The placement of the fire was crucial. Too close, and the heat could cook or dry out the meat prematurely. Too far, and insufficient smoke would reach the surface. Some smokehouses were multi-level, allowing meat to be hung at varying distances from the smoke source depending on its thickness or fat content. The airflow had to be carefully monitored, with vents opened or closed to control smoke density, temperature, and moisture levels. These details may seem minor, but they were the difference between perfectly preserved, flavorful meat and a ruined batch unfit for consumption. Every smokehouse reflected not only architectural ingenuity, but also an intimate understanding of fire, air, and food science. Patience was central to medieval smoking. Craftsmen often checked on meat multiple times a day, monitoring color, aroma, and texture. They understood that each cut of meat behaved differently. Fatty cuts absorbed smoke more slowly, lean cuts could dry out quickly, and game meat often required longer exposure due to its density. The smoking process was not simply mechanical, it was interactive, a conversation between the craftsman and the meat. Over time, the master smoker developed an intuitive sense of when the meat had reached perfection, guided by centuries of observation and tradition. Speed, in this context, was an enemy. The best results were achieved slowly, allowing smoke compounds to penetrate deeply while maintaining the meat's integrity and enhancing flavor. Medieval smoking was also an art in terms of aesthetics and presentation. The pell layer that formed on smoked meat was more than functional. It contributed to a visually appealing product that conveyed quality and care. Dark, uniform coloring indicated proper smoking, While an uneven or cracked surface could signal hasty or improper work, skilled smokers knew how to create an even coating that both protected and enhanced the meat, a practice that required consistent attention to detail and a precise understanding of how smoke, moisture, and temperature interacted over time. This attention to visual cues illustrates that medieval food craftsmanship extended beyond flavor and preservation. It included presentation, symbolism, and pride in workmanship. The cultural importance of smoking meat cannot be overstated. Smoking was not merely a domestic chore. It was a respected skill passed down through generations and sometimes formalized in guilds. Families and villages shared knowledge of wood types, fire management, and timing, creating regional traditions and signature flavors. Recipes were often guarded secrets, carefully adapted to local climates, livestock, and available resources. Some smoked meats became regional specialties, known not only for their long shelf life but also for the distinctive taste imparted by local woods and techniques. These traditions connected communities, strengthened social bonds, and reflected a sophisticated understanding of both science and culture, long before the formal study of microbiology or food chemistry. Interestingly, medieval smoking also had nutritional and health implications. By slowing bacterial growth and preserving vitamins, minerals, and proteins, the smoking process helped communities survive through harsh winters and periods of scarcity. Compared with modern industrial meats, which often lose nutritional value during high heat or chemical-based processing, traditionally smoked medieval meat retained much of its natural content. The slow exposure to smoke enhanced digestibility, preserved essential nutrients, and allowed meat to be stored safely for longer periods. While contemporary consumers rarely consider preservation as part of culinary health, medieval smokers inherently understood that careful preparation affected not only taste and appearance, but also the safety and longevity of their food. Fire placement, wood selection, and temperature control were not random. They were the result of careful experimentation, observation, and experience. Medieval smokers had to anticipate how smoke density would change over hours, how temperature fluctuations could affect texture, and how different woods would interact with fat content. These calculations were often mental and intuitive rather than measured scientifically, relying on years of observation and apprenticeship. Master smokers could sense slight changes in smoke color or aroma and adjust vents, firewood, or hanging height accordingly. Each decision influenced the meat's flavor, preservation, and overall quality, highlighting a level of craftsmanship that modern mechanized systems rarely replicate. Finally, medieval smoking techniques remind us of a lost balance between patience, skill, and culinary art. In today's world, industrial production favors speed, efficiency, and uniformity, often sacrificing flavor, texture, and nutritional quality. The traditional methods, which allowed meat to be slowly infused with flavor, protected from spoilage, and enhanced nutritionally, required dedication and knowledge that modern methods largely ignore. By revisiting these practices, we gain insight into a time when food was not only sustenance but also craft, science, and cultural expression. Each hanging cut of meat, each carefully tended fire, and each choice of wood tells a story of ingenuity, patience, and mastery. Reminders that the art of smoking meat was once a defining aspect of human culinary achievement. Unlike modern industrial methods, medieval meat smoking was a process that demanded patience, skill, and an intimate understanding of both fire and food. Today, we take for granted the convenience of pre-packaged, quickly smoked meats that appear on supermarket shelves within hours of production. In contrast, medieval craftsmen approached meat smoking as a long, deliberate craft. Large cuts of meat were often smoked for up to 2 weeks, ensuring that smoke fully penetrated the flesh while maintaining consistent temperature and humidity. After this initial smoking, many meats were aged in the same smokehouse for months, or even up to 2 years, allowing flavors to develop gradually and harmoniously. This slow, methodical approach creates deep, layered flavor profiles that modern techniques, designed for speed and mass production, cannot replicate. The resulting meats were not just preserved, they were culinary treasures, prized for their aroma, tenderness, and taste. The process required dedication. A single misstep in temperature, smoke density, or airflow could ruin an entire batch, highlighting the meticulous care that went into medieval food preservation. The choice of wood was central to this craft, with specific types carefully matched to different proteins. to enhance rather than overpower natural flavors. Delicate fish, for example, were traditionally smoked over alder, which produced a light, almost ethereal smoke, preserving the subtle taste without adding bitterness. Juniper was often used for game meats, such as venison, imparting a slightly resinous, aromatic note that complemented the rich, earthy flavors of wild animals. Mixed fruit woods, including apple, cherry, and plum, were favored for pork and poultry, introducing sweet, fragrant undertones that balanced the fat content and created a more complex taste. These decisions were never arbitrary. They reflected centuries of observation, experimentation, and accumulated knowledge passed down through families, guilds, and communities. Every choice, from wood type to hanging height, was deliberate, illustrating a nuanced understanding of how smoke interacts with protein over time. Smoking meat was not confined to grand smokehouses or specialized workshops. Even small households found ways to incorporate this practice into daily life, adapting chimneys, kitchen hearths, or small attached chambers for smoking purposes. In urban homes or villages without dedicated smokehouses, families would hang meat above low fires, allowing smoke to drift upward and envelop the cuts in a gentle, preservative haze. These improvised methods required ingenuity. Vents and openings were adjusted to control airflow, smoke density, and heat, while meat was monitored for color, texture, and aroma to ensure proper preservation. This integration of smoking into everyday household routines demonstrates that medieval preservation techniques were not just a professional craft, but also a practical solution for survival. Families, regardless of size or wealth, could produce safely preserved, flavorful meat, ensuring nourishment through winter months and times of scarcity. Time was the greatest ally of medieval smokers, and rushing the process was considered a critical error. Craftsmen knew that the transformation of meat through smoke was not immediate. It required days for the smoke to penetrate deeply, and weeks or months for flavors to stabilize. By contrast, modern fast food culture emphasizes speed over quality, treating meat as a product to be processed, packaged, and consumed quickly, often with chemical additives to replicate flavors and extend shelf life. Medieval practitioners understood that true preservation and true taste could only be achieved by letting the meat age slowly, exposed to smoke in a carefully controlled environment. This long maturation process allowed fat to oxidize naturally, protein fibers to relax, and flavors to concentrate, creating a final product with a richness, depth, and subtlety that modern smoking rarely achieves. In essence, medieval smoking was as much about time and observation as it was about fur, and smoke. The smokehouses themselves were masterpieces of practical design. Some were multi-tiered structures, allowing large cuts of meat to hang at varying distances from the fire, depending on thickness and fat content. Others used underground smoke channels, drawing smoke gently from outdoor pits into enclosed chambers to ensure a steady, cool flow. Temperature and humidity were meticulously managed, often through vent adjustments or strategic placement of logs within the fire. These architectural engineering choices were not merely functional, they reflected a sophisticated understanding of physics and chemistry in a time long before formal scientific study. Master smokers could sense subtle changes in smoke color or aroma and make adjustments instinctively, achieving a precise balance that modern mechanized systems often struggle to replicate. Beyond preservation and flavor, smoking had nutritional and health benefits. Slow smoking inhibited microbial growth without the need for modern chemical preservatives, retaining proteins, vitamins, and minerals that would otherwise be lost in high heat or fast processing methods. The gentle heat and prolonged exposure to smoke also made meats more digestible, allowing families to consume protein safely over extended periods. Archaeological studies indicate that communities with refined smoking techniques experienced fewer foodborne illnesses than might be expected for the era, suggesting that these methods were not only culinary but also protective. This intersection of practicality, nutrition, and artistry underscores the sophistication of medieval smoking techniques, revealing a system that was both functional and refined. Medieval smoked meat also carried cultural significance. Smoking was not merely a method of preservation, it was a craft, sometimes organized into guilds or passed down through family lines as a respected skill. Recipes and techniques varied by region, creating distinctive local flavors and styles. In some communities, smoked meats were central to feasts, celebrations, or trade, valued not only for their longevity but also for their taste and aesthetic appeal. The visual presentation of meat, the uniform color, the sheen of the pell layer, the subtle aroma, signaled quality and expertise, making smoked meats a point of pride and identity. These traditions illustrate that medieval smoking was both a science and an art, blending practical necessity with aesthetic and cultural considerations. Interestingly, medieval smoking was adaptable to different types of meat and scales of production. Large cuts could be prepared in communal smokehouses or monastery workshops, while small households could modify existing hearths for individual use. Game meats, livestock, and fish each required specific approaches, from wood selection to smoking duration, reflecting an intimate knowledge of animal anatomy, fat content, and local climate conditions. Even herbs, spices, and marinades were integrated into the process, adding both flavor and preservative properties. The result was a system that was resilient, flexible, and highly effective, capable of meeting the needs of diverse populations across Europe. In conclusion, medieval meat smoking represents a lost art of patience, skill, and careful observation. Unlike modern industrial methods, which prioritize speed and uniformity, medieval craftsmen understood that time was essential, that wood selection mattered, and that fire management could make or break a batch of meat. Their methods integrated food preservation into daily life, allowed families to survive harsh winters, and produce deeply flavorful, nutritionally preserved meat that modern techniques often fail to replicate. Rushing the process was unthinkable. Every step, from hanging to aging to selecting the correct wood, was deliberate, informed by centuries of experience and experimentation. In an age dominated by fast food and instant gratification, these lessons from the past remind us that quality, flavor, and longevity are inseparable from patience, care, and craftsmanship. Medieval smokers did more than preserve meat. They perfected a culinary science that married art, science, and tradition in ways that continue to inspire modern chefs and food enthusiasts alike. Their work serves as a timeless testament to the value of slow, thoughtful preparation, offering a window into a world where food was cherished, understood, and respected. In every stage of its transformation, the industrial meat industry abandoned traditional smoking and preservation methods, not because they were inferior, but because they were incompatible with profit-driven timelines. In medieval Europe, meat smoking was a process that demanded time, patience, and skill. Cold smoking, for example, took days or even weeks, depending on the cut, the type of wood, and the desired outcome. Fruitwood blends had to be carefully monitored and adjusted, producing subtle, layered flavors that modern methods rarely achieve. Even the aging of smoked meats, sometimes for as long as 2 years, was a deliberate choice, designed to deepen flavor, improve texture, and ensure long-term preservation. In today's industrial system, such processes are considered inefficient. Every hour a piece of meat spends in a smokehouse is an hour that it isn't producing profit. Yet, what the industrial approach sacrifices in speed, it cannot replicate in quality. The flavors, aromas, and textures of traditionally smoked and aged meat are richer, more nuanced, and far more satisfying than their modern, mass-produced counterparts. Medieval craftsmen understood the interplay between smoke, wood, and meat in ways that modern technology often overlooks. They knew that each protein type required different treatments. Pork, poultry, game, and fish each responded differently to smoke and temperature. Delicate fish needed light woods, like alder, which imparted flavor without overwhelming the natural taste. Rich, gamey meats, such as venison, paired best with juniper or oak, which added depth and complexity while balancing the fat content. Pork and poultry benefited from fruitwood blends, apple, cherry, or plum, which introduced subtle sweetness and fragrant layers to the meat. These choices were never accidental. They reflected generations of experimentation, observation, and refinement. A skilled smoker could intuitively adjust wood combinations, fire placement, and hanging height to ensure optimal flavor, aroma, and preservation, creating a final product that was as much a work of art as it was sustenance. The slow, deliberate nature of traditional smoking was essential not only for flavor, but also for preservation. Cold smoking involves exposing meat to smoke at temperatures below 90 degrees Fahrenheit, allowing smoke compounds like phenols and formaldehyde to act on the surface and penetrate gradually. This process inhibits bacterial growth, stabilizes the meat's proteins and fats, and forms a protective layer known as the pell. The pell both shields the meat and absorbs the aromatic qualities of the smoke, creating layers of flavor that industrial methods rarely achieve. Modern high-heat or rapid smoking processes, in contrast, can cook meat unevenly, strip it of moisture, or rely on chemical additives to mimic the effects that medieval techniques achieved naturally. The patience required for proper smoking, which might seem inconvenient by contemporary standards, was in fact the foundation of meat quality and safety for centuries. Even beyond taste and preservation, traditional methods had nutritional advantages. By avoiding rapid, high-temperature smoking or chemical preservatives, medieval smoked meat retained vitamins, minerals, and proteins that are often lost in industrial processing. Slow smoking improved digestibility, maintained natural fats, and allowed families to store food safely for extended periods. In a world without refrigeration, these methods were essential for survival. Communities that mastered these techniques could rely on their smoked meats throughout harsh winters or times of scarcity, demonstrating that medieval methods were both practical and scientifically effective, even if the craftsmen themselves did not articulate their work in modern scientific terms. The tools and structures used for smoking also played a crucial role. Smokehouses, whether large communal structures or small household adaptations, were ingeniously designed to control airflow, temperature, and smoke density. Multi-tiered smokehouses allowed different cuts of meat to be suspended at varying distances from the fire, ensuring even exposure and optimal preservation. In smaller homes, families adapted chimneys, kitchen hearths, or attached chambers to create improvised smoke environments, proving that these techniques were versatile and could be integrated into everyday life. Craftsmen monitored smoke color, aroma, and intensity throughout the process, adjusting vents, logs, and hanging heights to produce consistent, high-quality results. The careful observation and control required for successful smoking illustrate that medieval meat preservation was far more than a rudimentary technique. It was a sophisticated craft that combined elements of chemistry, physics, and artistry long before formal scientific study existed. The abandonment of these traditional methods by the industrial meat industry reflects the tension between speed and quality. In a profit-driven system, time is the enemy. Cold smoking, fruitwood blending, and long aging tie up resources and inventory, slowing production and reducing efficiency. Modern consumers are accustomed to rapid production cycles and predictable flavors, often unaware that convenience comes at a cost. Flavor complexity, nutritional quality, and the artistry of preservation are sacrificed for speed. Yet, for those willing to slow down, to invest time and attention in traditional methods, the results are unmatched. Meat, smoked and aged according to medieval techniques, is rich, nuanced, and satisfying in ways that mass-produced products cannot replicate. It tells a story of patience, skill, and respect for the ingredients, values largely lost in contemporary fast food culture. Relearning these techniques is not merely an exercise in historical curiosity. It offers a blueprint for eating better, more thoughtfully, and more sustainably. By embracing slow smoking, careful wood selection, and extended aging, we can reclaim flavors that have been lost for centuries. We can restore a connection to food that values time, skill, and natural processes over speed, uniformity, and profit. For modern cooks and chefs, this approach allows for creativity, experimentation, and a return to craftsmanship in an era dominated by industrialization. For families, it creates meals that are not only nourishing but also rich in flavor and history. Smoke, fire, and time. These are the tools of the medieval craftsman, and they remain as relevant today as they were centuries ago. Medieval smoked meats also remind us of a different relationship with food. In a world without refrigeration, without chemical preservatives, and without modern conveniences, survival depended on careful preparation, attention to detail, and respect for natural processes. Craftsmen understood that rushing the process could compromise both flavor and safety. They understood that time and patience were essential, not optional. These lessons have broader implications in today's fast-paced society. Slowing down, paying attention to quality, and investing care in what we eat leads to better outcomes, not only for flavor and health, but also for appreciation of the craft behind food. Consuming meat prepared with these principles allows us to taste history, to engage with the techniques of those who came before, and to experience meat as it was truly meant to be, flavorful, long-lasting, and created with care. In conclusion, the medieval approach to meat smoking offers lessons that remain profoundly relevant. Industrial methods prioritized speed and profit, abandoning centuries-old practices that produced unparalleled flavor, safety, and nutrition. Cold smoking, fruitwood blending, and long aging required patience, observation, and skill, resulting in meats that were complex, balanced, and naturally preserved. By relearning these techniques, we can reclaim lost flavors and restore a deeper connection to our food. Smoke, fire, and time were the tools of medieval craftsmen, tools that allowed them to craft meat that was rich in flavor, long-lasting, and prepared with intentional care. In adopting their methods, we are not merely practicing history, we are embracing a philosophy of eating that values patience, craftsmanship, and a slower, more thoughtful approach to food. In a world that moves too quickly, medieval meat smoking teaches us that quality cannot be rushed, that flavor is born from care, and that the most enduring pleasures, culinary or otherwise, are those we cultivate with time, attention, and respect.